And to our next conversation now, be drilling down on the real estate industry right here in Nigeria. A growing number of low-income tenants are leaving the city centers in Nigeria for the suburbs as house rents and inflation continue to surge, adding to the pain of rising costs of living in the country. Some locations that were affordable in terms of rent are no longer, so they have to go out, and they've gone out of reach of low-income renters at this time. Joining me now is Mr. AGK Edward Okpa, the Global Affairs Analyst and Real Estate Expert, joining me in the studio. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So quite a big blow inflation is dealing on the real estate industry globally. Right here in Nigeria, we've seen prices skyrocket, and it seems like it's a big problem. Talking about affordability of most of these properties.
Well, it's the same thing all over. You know, even in the U.S., we have issue with affordable housing. So the thing is always, how do you come up with policies that will help address that issue? But in the case of Nigeria, where access to capital is very limited, and then you have financial institutions, Nigerian banks are not very deep. Their scope on access to capital is very limited. So the question is, how does the average Nigerian obtain capital to build a home? Sometimes you see these homes being taking years to get built because it's build as you go. So that's then you talk about the rising cost of materials. So in real estate, the most important thing is capital. How do you recycle capital to be able to build structures either for rental, for office, for industrial? But in the case of homes, you look at the civil servant. When most civil servants don't even get their money on time, so how are they able to make their monthly payment? And how are they able to now support other things? It's not just having a housing, it's also having the things that make you as a human being, feeding, accommodate, health issues and travel and all that kind of stuff. So the Nigerian government is not able to do it because they don't have the policy. You go into the World Bank and IMF to do this, you have to make the Naira stronger. You have to strengthen the value of the Naira in comparison to foreign currencies, because that's what's going to afford the Nigerians the opportunity. So if you earn 1 million Naira, for instance, and then you work your way downwards, how much of that disposable income goes paying your rent? And you find that 1 million Naira relatively to other currencies is no money, because the exchange rate now is about $2,000 or less. So can anybody actually live on $2,000? But if you can strengthen the Naira through monetary policies and at the interest rate, because money has a factor to it, and that factor is the interest rate. If Nigerian banks are charging you 20–30%, how are you going to survive? Even if it's interest only or amortization. If it's amortization, it's just a chunk of money coming out of that income, because at the end of the day, whether you're a government, individual, or corporation, you have a revenue source. And that revenue source is what makes you to do other things.
And talking about, the interest rate hikes, we've had a big one right here in Nigeria. MPR starting at 18%, all, in a bid to, battle inflation at this time. So at the end of the day, they don't have much to do.
Yeah, okay, look at 18%. Look at 18%, okay? If it's 18% interest only on 1 million Naira, you have to earn 3 times that interest. You have to make it from whatever business you're doing in order to support paying the bank the 18%, because 18% interest only on 1 million Naira is 180,000 Naira annually. So if you're a business person, you have to generate 540 million Naira to satisfy the interest position, pay yourself for the effort, and then do other things. So who makes that kind of money? Who? So the government has to come in and pass what I call a usury law and limit the type of interest rate you charge specifically on housing. I mean, in America back in the 80s, until Reagan came in and we passed this usury law, now we borrow money at 3 or 4% for housing, because it varies based on the sector. And housing is a significant part of every economy. In America, our real estate contributes 70% of our economic wealth. So if you don't get it right in the housing sector, you're not going to get the economy right. It doesn't matter what else happens in the software, the technology. The human being needs what? food, shelter, and clothing, and that is what everybody needs. Before you start thinking of, the other things that makes life a little more happier.
All right, so looking at the situation right now, we're seeing the prices of building materials, that's way up, at this time. How do you think developers can, maneuver the industry with these prices?
Well, again, 80% or more of what you need to build any real estate is local. Sand, gravel, water. Then rebars, what we call the rods, that can be imported or you can be fabricated locally. So if you don't get a handle, if you import in a significant part, even a tiny portion of that, which is the rebars or the rods or the other thing, the fixtures you put in the house, that makes the cost factor go up. But the sand is the sand. The stone, and then Nigeria doesn't have the variety of building material choices. We don't use wood. We don't use even the thatch roof that has been the traditional thing. By now, we should have come up with a system how those things can be used in certain parts of the country because it's a very hot country. So the way you build in Sokoto is not going to be the way you build in Bayelsa. You have to localize these materials and make them suitable. And when you're able, so you have to have Institute of Building Material Research to keep coming up with ways. What can we use based on where you are in Nigeria? The cinder block thing that everybody uses chokes the system. It's heavy. Nigerian buildings look like a bunker. It's like a fortress. And then the architects don't even help the matter because they design monumental stuff. We need to have functional. Nigerian architecture homes are not functional. They have to be functional. And then when they are functional, that means they are tailored and built to suit the human being. So you go into these homes, sometimes the cost of the gate is even bigger than the house itself. So we got to get back to what materials do we have locally? Can we research, refine, keep improving on it to make the cost factor come down? US, that's what I do. I develop real estate, I consult for real estate. At the end of the day, it's always, what is it costing me to do X, Y, Z? And if that X, Y, Z, can I have the rental income to support it? Because here in Nigeria, the rental income don't support the real estate. Sometimes Nigerians build for prestige. Or you have these politicians who are trying to move money and launder money. They just build. There's no market. There's no reason behind it. And then the banks don't even come in and finance. Nigerian banking institution has less than $5 billion in aggregate mortgage. And you're talking about 200 million Nigerians. There's a housing need in Nigeria by maybe 60-something million housing units to support the 200 million population that is out there. So where's the money coming from? So people are doing it out of pocket, and because of that cost factor. You don't have our contractors give you guarantees. That guarantee, in the US, when I build something, I'm going to go to a contractor and say, I want you to guarantee this contract. So that way I know I'm pegging my cost, as opposed to the contractor coming and say, we have to come up with more money.
Because once you start a project and you estimate this is what the project is going to cost, at this time.
You want to peg it. Guaranteed.
It ends up changing before you get to the end of
So by the time you do the foundation, to the walls, to the lintel, to the roofing, you almost 5 times the cost that you started. So that's why you see a lot of abandoned projects. In fact, Nigeria has the highest uncompleted, abandoned project in the world of any country of its size. Nigeria has it. In fact, if you start to finish the abandoned project Nigeria has, it will take you another 20 years.
But with the developers, back here, we see a lot of new projects, springing up in different areas.
But the volume is relatively small. No Nigerian developer builds 5,000 housing units a year. No Nigerian developer does, not in Enugu, not in Lagos, not in anywhere. That is a single developer. But I can master plan a community of 10,000 housing units, and then, because a developer is different from the builder. A developer is the one that creates the framework, the concept, identifies all the things that needs to happen, and then you have builders who come in and take down lots. We call them lots, you call them plots. And then you have an architectural control, and you have a certain market condition you are targeting. Because, we have veterans, people who are in the army in the US, they have a separate housing need. We have police people. So when we come into a zip code, which we always talk about what is the price. In Lagos, a flat cost, maybe it will be different from like Oyo's, or your Enugu. So you target that market and you create specific policies. Housing is very successful when the policies are strong. Nigeria don't have a strong housing policy because the politicians don't even get there and they don't seek proper counsel. They go to World Bank. We live in World Bank. World Bank has nothing to do with our economy. But they come to Nigeria and they're a big force. So in the World Bank Housing Assistance Program, well, what's that? Find professionals, find people who have hands-on knowledge to come in here and speak with the Nigerian, practitioners, politicians, and say, this is how you do it. That's how you're going to migrate from the quagmire of today's situation. But as long as you keep going to the World Bank, you will never grow the economy. No country has had a successful economy since the 40s. The World Bank was intentionally done for the Western Europeans. It wasn't done for Africa. So what Africa is doing with it now is purely by accident. They don't know what to do. That's why no country that has...
And they are bringing a lot of support, at this time.
But they're bringing support that nobody has emerged. If I'm going to support you, you have to go from A to B. So name a country in sub-Saharan Africa since 1940-something when the World Bank started doing stuff that has succeeded. None. Because they're not, World Bank is not a practitioner thing. They're just a bunch of academians or something who just, show you beautiful charts. Every country has to have its own DNA.
Well, yeah, it is important to have your own at this point.
Identify
Let's look at, real estate now as a hedge. We've heard, arguments that real estate is that hedge, against inflation. How do you think real estate has performed, globally as a hedge with rising inflation at this time?
You could always have something rising. From the time human beings started interacting, through the air border or by monetary exchanges, prices are going to rise. The thing is, how do you control the price without forcing the market? For instance, in a capitalist environment that is different from a socialist one or a heavily controlled economy. Nigeria is a heavily controlled economy by the government. The government gets into a whole bunch of stuff. China is the same way, Russia is the same way. America has some symbols.
Seems to be working for China, though. It seems to be working for China.
It's not working for China. China, again, we don't want to get into that. But, for those who are listening about China, China is a big for nothing country. When you look at the per capita income of the Chinese, it's still less than $15,000. Okay? But they have managed to use the media to put a good face for themselves. 90% of Chinese, this will shock you, 90% of Chinese are poorer than everybody in Africa. 90% of them.
That's a staggering number.
But people, no, for instance, that's what it is. 90% of Chinese are abject poor Chinese. But, those of them that have made it, when they're with the government desire to put their better foot, not best foot, because when you say best foot, it means they have 3 legs. But a better foot for what? They have cornered the media to project this image of one China doing this, China doing that. No. But Chinese are still very poor people. They are not well educated, but they know how to follow order.
And with all of that technology coming out from China,
no, the technology coming out from China is a default technology because of the cost of doing those technology in the West. So they outsource them to China, and then China has been able to copy. China is not an innovative country, or it's not even a creative one, because creativity and innovation comes when you have freedom. So in a controlled environment, you are not allowed to think outside of what your government or your culture wants. And that limits your ability to be very efficient or effective in solving problems. So the Chinese don't solve problems, they are told what to do. When the chairman talks, it's a heavily controlled economy. The chairman says it's like a waterfall. It goes down, nobody says, no, don't push back.
But we see the way China, impacts most markets now, especially
because
the oil
people
market.
No, it does not. I live in America.
Biggest buyer.
No. Look, China does not have $100 billion exposure in American enterprise system. They don't. If you look at the stock market, what percentage of this capitalized company in America is owned by China? It's not. But in countries like Nigeria, where Nigeria is hungry and Nigeria is desperate, so they take anything from anybody. But in aggregate number, in quantifiable, qualitative number, China is still a very poor country. India, 95% of Indians are poorer than Africans. In fact, the per capita income of South Africa is bigger than per capita income of China.
But there is poverty everywhere. But let me take you back. Let me take you back now to that hedge, because everyone is still looking for a hedge. At this point, inflation is still rising.
But you see, the hedge.
How does real estate?
Do you know when I left Nigeria for America in the 80s, 1 million naira was equivalent value of $1.7 million. 1 million naira. My ticket from Nigeria to England to Dallas, how much was it? 698 naira 50 kobo.
Good times.
Okay?
Yeah.
Today, if you are a financial analyst and you do present value, future value, holding time, and you solve for I, if you put that in the computer for the case of the valuation of the Naira, your computer will be blinking. You will go from here to London and come back and still have not solved that problem because that's crazy. So what is choking Nigeria is the devaluation of the Naira. And the Nigerian government, through their political establishments and professional practitioners, haven't been able to come back to arrest that devaluation. So even if everybody in the world lends money to Nigeria, it's still not going to emerge. You can never borrow yourself to prosperity. You could become a deficit nation and see success. America is a deficit nation, but successful, because deficit is different from debt. Nigeria has debt, but they don't have a stabilized, regular source of income because the government has neglected its role in what it's supposed to do to give confidence to the local economy. Every country is entitled to the economy by sovereign right. So you don't have to accept the devaluation of your country to that of anybody else, because once you do that, it puts you in a very rare catching stage. You're not able to catch up. And so Nigeria hasn't been able to catch up since the 85s, when World Bank came in and sold Nigeria on SAP, Structural Adjustment Program. And the Naira has been falling since then. So what needs to happen? If the incoming administration, I don't know whether the selected president or the elected president, whoever that is going to be, okay, elected or selected, whomever that is, the most important thing promise they have to make to the Nigerian is the Naira to be stabilized in the next 4 years, to where even if you want to peg it or you want to float it, but you cannot afford to have this quicksand devaluation of Naira. Buhari said it, but he didn't do anything, because if 1 million naira today that gives you about $1,500, $1,500, if in the next 4 years you could get it to be 5,000. You would have grown that economy by more multiples of hundreds without pumping any additional oil. It's the purchasing power parity to the exchange rate that matters, as opposed to the volume.
You did talk about real estate being a fantastic replacement for oil.
No, it is. It is. I mean, like I said, the U.S. Economic value is real estate. 70% of it is real estate related, because in Nigeria, they are basically focused on physical real estate, not the real property. Real estate can become an export good. You can export it, but you don't export the physical land and building. You export the rights that are attached to it. So somebody can be outside of Nigeria and invest billions of dollars in Nigerian real estate because of the rights they have to the income in the real estate. So in the case of Nigeria, nobody invests in Nigerian real estate because the rights to it are questionable. Most properties here don't have marketable title, because you could say, I own it. Somebody else would say, I have the certificate of occupancy. No, but the CFO is not marketable, because a governor can wake up one day and revoke it. So you have to find a way to assure confidence. Real estate is a confident product. Regularity of income, predictability of income, and the fact that if I want to foreclose on you, I don't have to go romance the governor. I don't have to know the Amainabo, the Igwe, the Oba. Those people have to be removed. It's you that has right to that. Real estate can decide what happens to it to the extent of the zoning and the regulation, which again Nigeria doesn't have.
You're talking about reforms when it comes to title.
You have to do it. I mean, before Obasanjo introduced the Land Use Decree in 1978, which became Land Use Act in 1979, Nigeria used to have crown land. Government didn't come in and take your land until that Obasanjo scheme came in, and since then it has become what has devalued and made it challenging for Nigerians to really, because 200 million people, economy is based on number. It has nothing to do with the minerals. The reason people celebrate in Middle Eastern countries is that they are small and they have a lot of revenue.
So going forward, what would you like to see in the real estate sector, policy-wise?
What I have to see is you have to localize it. Every real estate is local. Okay? So now that you have 6 political zones, you go in and say, how do people want to live there? What is the attitude? I mean, the way the man in the north of Castina lives is different from the way the guy who lives in the south. Look at the things that motivates their existence in that particular area and come up with the policy. And then encourage Nigerian institutions. We have to have a secondary market. Okay, the secondary market is where that recycles money back into the real estate. But since you don't have a strong secondary market, so the title you have to your land, nobody buys it. If you go to Nigerian bank today and say, I want to borrow a certain percentage of the asset or the equity I have in my home, they're probably going to be laughing at you because they're not sophisticated to that level. So start to engage the Nigerians who are outside of Nigeria, who have a long-term interest in the success of this country as opposed to the World Bank. Excuse those of you that work for the World Bank or love the World Bank, I have nothing against them, but they're not relevant for your growth. Find the Nigerians who are outside. I went to college in Nigeria before I left. Okay? And I come back. Engage in a discussion, and then with that discussion, it's not a debate, it's a discussion, it's a conversation.
Right.
And then we say, what policy would we want to emerge out of this? And then we begin to work on the Naira.
All right, so much to unpack there, but I guess the new incoming administration have a lot to do. We're talking about the real estate industry, but we hope for the very best.
If they're serious and committed.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ejike, real estate expert and global affairs analyst. It was great having your perspective today.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much.